Hey there, Legion, this is Hadrian. Thank you for being here. Let's play some more of The Long Dark in episode 20, the final regular series episode of Survival School, revised for 2018. Man, that was a bit of a mouthful. So what I've decided I want to do with this final episode is kind of what I was talking about at the end of the last one, and I think in the one prior to that as well, is kind of just have a bit of a catch-all episode. So let me say up front before you watch this, this is really just going to be me going through a bit of a laundry list of smaller topics that I feel like I haven't covered yet in the series, or maybe haven't covered satisfactorily, or that people asked me to revisit, or just things that occurred to me as being important for me to touch on. So this is really for folks who have watched the entire series, who don't mind me playing, or who don't mind listening to me while playing The Long Dark, and who don't mind listening to my advice, because I'm just going to be going over a lot of kind of smaller items. I have a list of about 11 written down, and I just came up with a 12th during a previous attempt at starting this. But oh my god, like doing this recording today has been insane. Like I have been interrupted 5 to 10 minutes into each recording like 6 or 7 times. I am surprised I'm still in a good mood. But we're going to try and get through this because I've got stuff to do at this point. But anyway, all that aside, I have a list of about 12 items I want to cover. And then I have a couple of just kind of concluding notes that I will talk about once we are comfortable getting to a point where we say that we're concluding and that it's over. It's not going to be completely over because, as I'll mention towards the end, I'm still happy to do, and I've said this already, I'm still happy to do on-demand episodes if somebody asks a question, or somebody makes a really good point, or if a new feature comes out that maybe doesn't necessarily demand a whole new take on the series again, but might kind of necessitate me doing additional content to explain, hey, they added this new thing and here's what it's about. I might do stuff like that. The only downside of that is that if it was in this series playlist, it would be harder to discover on YouTube. It's a weird thing with playlists because it would be associated with older content. Man, that is a really, really pretty sunset. Holy crap. I'm having to keep my head in a swivel because of wolves nearby. But so part of what I did to kind of think about this episode and think about what I wanted to talk about in this episode is, oh, hey, there's some wood, is I booted up a playthrough. This is a fresh playthrough. It's not the one you saw in 18 and 19. I booted up a playthrough, and I just, I played just this morning, and how long have I survived? And yes, that's Jennifer's voice you heard, because again, I wasn't even necessarily planning to use this for the episode, but it sort of dawned on me as a good idea. 4 days. There you go. Sort of dawned on me as a good idea the longer I played. It's just so pretty. Oh, there's a line in the sky, though. Oh, moment ruined. Oh, that makes me so sad. I've never seen that before either. Oh, it's weird. Look at that. It's dead center of the screen. Look. Oh my gosh. Still nice. I'm guessing because it's on, like the clouds are on a loop, and that's the seam. So they just hope that you won't spot it, but it's there. Okay. Anyway, what I did was I booted up this kind of fresh playthrough, and rather than commentating while playing and distracting myself, I really just sort of played for a little while and took some notes, both literally and mentally, on things that kind of occurred to me while I was playing without having to commentate while playing. And a few things came to mind that I'll talk about. And then, like I said, a few things came from you guys in the comments. So the first thing I want to mention is something that I'm fairly certain I've already brought up in the series once it was pointed out previously that I didn't touch on it. I addressed the question much earlier of what kind of happens when you run out of matches. I've talked so much about conserving matches. Well, let's say you're even like as conservative as you can possibly be. Once you're out of matches, what do you do? Like, what happens to you? And there's one thing that I didn't mention originally, and I genuinely cannot recall. So I may have gone back to this once in the series already, but even if I did, I will say it again because it's important. There is a way to light matches if you don't have a fire striker, and once you're out of, or light fires once you don't have a fire striker and once you're out of matches, and that is a magnifying glass. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a magnifying glass in this playthrough to demonstrate this, and as you might imagine, in order to use a magnifying glass to light a fire, you're going to need sunlight, so it's dependent on certain times of day, absolutely. But you can definitely use a magnifying glass, which is discoverable in the world even on high difficulty. So just know that that's an option. Magnifying glasses are a thing that you can use to light fires. That's item number 1 on my list. Item number 2, I have found so many toolkits this run. This is crazy. And yes, I'm encumbered. You want to know what I'm mostly encumbered by? Water. I've been by all the houses in Coastal Highway, and there's just ridiculous amounts of water in my inventory right now. There's no reason I should be carrying this much water, but I'm going to drop it back off at Quonset when I get over there. So, number 2 is something that I just kind of started doing automatically in this playthrough that I haven't done as much. Oh, I thought that would be a deer corpse that the crows are circling, but it's not. It's a human body. Let's go visit. Let's go visit with him for a while. Let's be sociable. Well, I talk to the corpses most of the time in Long Dark anyway, so that joke actually kind of backfired. But the first thing that I found myself doing, that again, I haven't done as much in my Long Dark playthroughs before, is curing on the go. I've talked a lot about, and I definitely demonstrated earlier in the series, here's this animal hide that I've taken off of some fresh kill. Let's, drop it off on the interior of some, base that I've permanently or temporarily set up. And that will be, hang on. That's a deer. Okay. I saw something and I wasn't sure if it was a wolf or a deer. And that will be the spot where it cures. Well, sometimes you don't have a base set up yet, or sometimes you need to keep moving, which we're going to talk about yet again towards the end of this episode, I promise you, because that's such a huge thing to me, and I just think it's a big thing for the Long Dark period, even if you want to be a more sedentary player. But let's say you're just not at a spot where you're really to sit and wait for something to cure. Well, what do you do at that point? Easy. Every time you need to sleep, every time you're going to stop indoors anywhere, whether you're in a cave or inside an actual house, just put the hide and guts down to cure every time you sleep. And I mean, if you're sleeping for 10 hours at a time, getting a full night's rest, which of course is more than a full night's rest, but in the Long Dark, that's how long you need to sleep to go from full exhaustion to roughly full recovered, if not entirely full recovered. What's this? A second heavy hammer. All right then. Well, I can't really afford to lug that around, but I'll take the second heavy hammer. And a frozen angler. Excellent. I've been pretty lucky with skill books this run. So yeah, curing on the go is a strategy that you can use when you need to cure something, whether it's guts or hide, whatever it may be, or saplings. And you don't necessarily have the ability to settle down just yet. So know that that is a possibility as well. Third, another thing that I kind of came up with while I was playing through this particular run. Notice I've got my rifle at 100% condition. If I didn't mention this earlier when it comes to the shooting mechanics in the Long Dark, one of the things you can do to do yourself a really big favor and make sure that you have a high chance of taking down anything that you shoot at the moment you raise your rifle and shoot at it is making sure that you keep the rifle as clean as possible. That does actually interact with the aiming and hit die rolls, or not that there's not a die roll for aiming, but you know what I mean. The chance to hit and the chance to critical are impacted by the condition of the rifle. The crappier the rifle, the more likely you are to miss something that you're pointing straight at because the bullet just goes astray. Kind of frustrating. So do yourself a favor, don't be like me, and get really, really mad at the Long Dark when you miss things. Keep your rifle clean, and if you shoot with relatively low levels of exhaustion and a good aim and a clean rifle, most of the time you shouldn't have to deal with the nonsense of those misses that shouldn't be misses. So keep your rifle clean. Number 4, and this came from a question that came up in the comments, and that is, Jennifer, I'm talking. Flashlights. Is that a hook? Yes, that's a hook. Nice. What's the point of flashlights? When do you use them? Why are they in the Long Dark? There's no electricity in this game. What's going on? Why flashlights? Oh my god. So, that's exactly how you all ask the question to yourselves every day. I know. So, there really isn't much use for a flashlight, but when there is an aurora, just like everything else electric in the world... Oh yeah, that's right, I don't have... I guess I can light this, but I don't have a lantern yet. Yay. Using a torch, old school style. So, when there is an aurora, just like everything else electric in the world, you can actually use a flashlight, as I believe I mentioned once earlier in the series, but I'll say again. And you can even high beam it for a short amount of time. It drains the quote-unquote battery quickly. And you can use it to scare off wildlife. Now, you can use it to look around as well, but it's not particularly easy to look around with the flashlight because it's such a focused beam of light. It's easier to have an ambient source of light like I'm using right now, like a torch or the lantern. But the flashlights are, in fact, a thing. So just know that when you find one, they're not completely useless. They are heavy, though, and frankly, most of the time that I find myself playing with them, maybe it's because they're new and I haven't used them that much yet. Hey, come here. Tomato soup.
Is getting too heavy to carry.
I know, Jennifer. Maybe just because I'm new to them, I am not as familiar with like how to use them very effectively. So again, we can talk in the comments about whether or not, there are better things to do with the flashlight, or there's like a particular trick that you get access to as a result of having the flashlight that you wouldn't otherwise. But I typically put them down, honestly. So it's probably going to come down to that. It's player preference and what you really feel like doing with your long dark playtime. Somebody asked me, this is on an earlier episode, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Wool scarf will come in handy. I thought it was worth mentioning because I didn't really mention this. I haven't talked a lot about the map because I am not much of a mapper, but when you get out the charcoal map, which I haven't done any of in this particular playthrough, so there's nothing here, but let's say I had the central area mapped out. Would I be able to see myself, like see my position on the map? Does your position show ever, even if you have a fully mapped out zone? The answer to that question is no. Hell no. Does it ever do that? The reason I answer so emphatically is that, again, that would be, think about how blatantly against the Long Dark's design philosophies that would be. You're in this survival situation, you don't have electronics, you don't have any means of really being able to tell exactly where you are. So any map that you have, whether you're having to make it yourself or not, you're not going to be able to see where you are on it. You're going to have to make out where you are on it based on your knowledge of the location and how that maps, no pun intended, onto the charcoal map that you've drawn. So just be aware of that. I'm not trying to be like, I don't mean at all to be rude in my answering of the question. It's a good question, but the answer is hell no. It doesn't work that way, and it never will. That's not something that is just not in the game yet, and they're going to add it at some point in the future. No. That's just not that way. So, okay, we actually have because this is a full torch that I found in a cave. This still has a good amount of burn left on it, and I don't need it anymore. So let me go ahead and extinguish it. I'm kind of tempted to go back that way, but I'm carrying so much stuff. I need to go back to my base and drop some stuff off before I do any more exploring. I found some food, so I'll be okay. Next order of business. Somebody asked me to talk about strategies for getting away from wolves in different situations. First of all, a couple of details that I might not have mentioned previously. First of all, of the two details that I might not have mentioned previously.
Time to look for shelter.
I'm talking, Jennifer. It is possible to outrun a wolf to a point that they will give up on their chase. It is possible. You can run, and eventually the wolf will just lose interest. Now, if a wolf has actually started charging you, that's not as likely to happen. It is still possible to outrun a wolf. I did earlier in this playthrough, in fact, when they are howling and literally like right on top of you and interested in eating you. You have to be at full tilt sprint. You can't be encumbered, and you better be able to get to shelter because the wolf is going to be right behind you. But a full sprint is enough to stay ahead of a wolf if you can get to shelter fast enough, and again, if you're not encumbered. The second thing is that there is generally, not always, but a lot of the time, there is actually a little bit of a signal you can listen for, in the same way that crows have a special way of indicating that bears are nearby. If a wolf howls while you're trying to get away from a wolf that's tracking you, again, not a wolf that's chasing you, but a wolf that's tracking you, that you know is following you and is coming toward you. If a wolf howls when you're on the run trying to get it to break your, to stop chasing you, to stop coming after you, that is generally an indicator that it's given up. It happens a lot of the time. I don't necessarily know, and again, comments can clarify this. I'm happy to let you guys fill in the blank for me, but I don't think it happens every single time. But it's very common. That's right, don't have a pry bar yet. Yay. But if you hear a howl when you're trying to get away from a wolf, that might be an indicator. That doesn't mean you should just stop and turn around and be like, hey, I'm safe. But it might mean that the wolf has just given up. So that's one thing that you can use as an indicator without having to actually turn around and endanger yourself. The next thing is toolkits. Of course, I picked one up a little bit ago, this normal toolkit, and I've got some quality toolkits back at the base. Toolkits only have a function for certain items, the items that require a toolkit in order to be fully repaired, things like the hacksaw. But for those items, the type of toolkit that you have, whether it's a normal toolkit or a quality toolkit, will can increase the repair time on the item, or can decrease the repair time by up to 50%, which is pretty nice. So that's just something to be aware of, is that the type of toolkit you have on you and is important, and what they're used for is the repairing of certain items, like I said, usually the hacksaw, and a few other metal items.
Something to eat.
Okay, I guess I'll feed you. So demanding. These sardines are at 66% condition, so I think I feel safe eating them. Those of you who've been on the channel for a while might be like, no, don't eat the sardines. And, okay, the next thing I want to mention really quickly, that's a stone, is I just want to touch one more time on the struggle mechanics. Because I kind of, in the previous episode, I think, or maybe it was 18 or 19, it was somewhere in there, I mentioned that someone named Timberwolf on the Long Dark forums had gone in and done like an analysis of whether or not the axe was better, the knife was better, which struggle weapon against a wolf, using a naked character and a pretty impressive testing method, which weapon really did the best. And their argument was the axe was the weapon to use. And I just want to re-emphasize what I did at the beginning of that entire description, which was the massive caveat of the way the system is supposed to work is that every weapon is supposed to have its own distinct advantages. So if one weapon, the way the system is currently set up in the game, in the current version, if one weapon happens to have an advantage where, statistically speaking, it's the best weapon to use on average, chances are that's going to get tweaked. So I did, because I was so impressed by that analysis, and because I looked at the information that was presented, and I found it really interesting that someone went to that trouble to do that, I did go ahead and pass along, that basic recommendation, which was, that the axe might be the way to go a lot of the time. But remember that my foremost recommendation was made earlier in the series when I talked about how each weapon is supposed to work in a struggle. Okay? So just be aware of that. There was supposed to be a massive caveat in front of that recommendation about the axe. And so I just want to make sure I clarify that for folks, because ultimately the way the game is supposed to work is the way I initially described it, and they are going to tune the game, most likely. I don't know for sure, but they are likely to tune the game in the future based on that description that I've already given you. Hang on, there could be wolves in this area, so I'm going to shut up for a second and focus. I'm checking for a hatchet. There is not one. Okay, so there's that. Talked about struggle mechanics. Just want to make sure that I was clear about all that. Oh, I forgot. I really don't. Screw it. This is just a dummy playthrough. Can light one more match. I just want to be able to see things. Look at me being wasteful after all my preaching about not wasting matches. Shame on me. What kind of a teacher am I? So, next item on my list is sprains. Now, we talked about different kinds of injuries that can happen. Well, we really didn't talk as much about the injuries. We talked about conditions. We talked about food poisoning, and we talked about intestinal parasites on higher level difficulties. When you try to eat carnivore meat, there's a risk of intestinal parasites. But you can also just get sprains. Sprains are especially likely when you are traversing hills. They are especially likely when you are traversing terrain quickly. So when you're sprinting, you're more likely to get a sprain. But also on top of that, hang on, just being careful again. I still don't trust completely that there's not a wolf in the area. And like I said, these current settings have wolves on crazy mode. So the wolves are rare, but I'm just being super careful. Okay, I put this out. So with sprains, they're a specific type of injury. You can get a sprain from a bite. You can get a sprain from, like I said, running too quickly on a slope or just running when encumbered or anything like that. Sprains are more likely when you're encumbered as well. But sprains can be healed instantly using painkillers or using rosehip tea, if you have rosehip tea in the place of painkillers. But if you didn't know this, because this wasn't clear to me for a long time, you don't have to heal them that way. You can also just sleep. Earlier in this playthrough, when I was playing this morning, I got some sprains because I was walking around encumbered, and not only did I sprain my wrist and my ankle at the same time, but then a wolf snuck up on me because I had and he literally snuck up on me too. It's pretty funny. I had a skin and a couple of guts on me, and as a result of carrying those scented items, even though it wasn't showing me on the interface here a scent indicator, as a result of having those in my inventory, the wolf didn't bark on its way up to me. All of a sudden, I just heard the growl. I heard the sound indicating that the wolf was charging, and it attacked me from behind. Yeah, that can happen. Because, again, and I mentioned this much earlier in the series, when you're giving off a scent, there's a chance they'll stalk you. You won't know they're coming because they want what they can smell, right? And the wolf attacked me, and thankfully I had a heavy hammer on me, so I managed to scare the wolf off very quickly. It did very little damage to me, but it did sprain my ankle. So I had 2 sprains, one on each ankle, and a sprained wrist. And all I did was step inside because I was very near shelter when this happened. I was about to step inside anyway. I stepped inside, and I slept for a full night, and I was fine. So just know that with sprains, you can do that. Sprains, by the way, on your wrist are going to prevent you from using a weapon of any kind. So that can be harmful, obviously, in your ability to fend off wildlife, either in hand-to-hand combat or at a distance. Sprains on your ankles will, of course, prevent you from sprinting. So that can be problematic in its own right. So be aware of that. Also, just want to touch again on the reality, as I have mentioned a few times, that for whatever strange reason, we've talked about this in the comments a lot as well, for whatever strange reason in the Long Dark, what are you? What are you? You're a wolf. Okay, you're far, though. You're far. You stay there. I'm going to just go here. You're going to ignore me. Yeah, you're going to keep walking that way. Thanks, wolf. Okay. For whatever reason in the Long Dark, outdoor fires last longer than indoor fires. Indoor fires will last exactly as long as they're supposed to. So if the indoor fire says it's going to be done in 2 hours, you can do other activities, whether it's passing time or cooking or whatever else. And you can do those for 2 hours, and the fire will last exactly that much time. Hey, thanks for the food, game. I needed that. However, if you light a fire outside, you will find that in general... Anything in the back seat? Not really. You'll find that in general, if you spend that same amount of time doing stuff, when you're done passing that time, all of a sudden, you'll still have more time than you were supposed to have when you started that activity. Outdoor fires just last longer. It might be something that gets fixed, or it might be something that gets explained in the interface to where it's not something I have to explain in this way in a tutorial. But right now, in February 2018, you do have that advantage. So I'll give you an example of when that could come in handy. Just earlier in this series, I killed a wolf with my rifle that was charging me. The only reason I killed it was because I was defending myself. But when it was laying there dead on the ground, I don't have a knife on me yet. I don't have a hatchet. I don't have any means of skinning it. So I had to use my hands. But I was like, well, I don't have time. I don't have the clothing to protect me. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I could light a fire by this wolf. It's kind of dangerous. I don't have any shelter. But if the weather stays good, then I'll take the risk and I can have the wolf skin and the guts. And that's actually the same thing that attracted a wolf to me later on that gave me that sprain. But what I did was I got the skin and I got the guts with the fire lit right next to me. And it was saying that it was going to take a certain amount of time. But because I knew that the fire would actually take longer, I was able to, do a little bit. I didn't overshoot how much time I wanted to spend on the corpse harvesting, carcass harvesting. But I did. We got a quick weather change here. Hang on. I'm looking around for wolves again. But I did just know intuitively that I would have extra time. There is definitely a wolf in the Quonset right now, so it's getting darker, and I want to be super careful. Give me a second. Oh, this is just lovely. This is my favorite thing ever. This is a wonderful tense note to end Survival School 20 on. Thanks, game. I appreciate you giving me a nice, solid reminder of how terrifying this game can be. I mean, how terrifying you can be. I'm talking to you as if you're a conscious entity. I should maintain my verbiage as such. Have I been in this truck yet? I don't know. This is really freaking scary. All right. No, I haven't been in this truck yet. Let's check the glove box. Nothing in there. Shame on me. I've been in the Quonset, but I haven't checked this truck yet. Oh yeah, that's right. When I came in here before, I was running from a wolf. Okay. Stepping inside. And I think I need to sleep. So, okay, good. We've got a bit of night vision, so I don't have to necessarily end it right here. But, let's go ahead and drink. Oh no, I don't need to drink. What do I need to do? Almost done with my list. I have a few concluding notes. Let me just, that's right. I need to eat. Copious quantities. Not really. Just gonna eat what I have on me. And we'll call it a night. So one last thing that I want to mention, now that I've gone over the fire weirdness again. Some of you might be wondering, and I have one of my very, very long-time subscribers, he commented on this earlier today, jokingly. and I responded jokingly, because it's not something that I'm going to talk a lot about at all. But some of you might be wondering, hey, are you going to talk about prepper caches at all? What's a prepper cache? Hadrian, you might be wondering. I've never heard of a prepper cache. What is this thing of which you speak? I'm not telling. When you find one, you'll know. And that's all I'll say. That's not a thing that I'm going to include in this version of Survival School. I can't remember if I did an episode on them in Survival School 2017. If you're super curious, go back and look at that playlist. I doubt that I would have then any more than I, do now. Or I doubt that I would have been interested in doing that then any more than I am now. But, hang on, let's pass the time for like an hour, and then we should get some, like, rudimentary sunlight. Nope. Come on. Okay, we're starting to get some. There we go. I never like to end an episode on like a really dark note, especially because I have a few last things I want to add here. And I really did not think this would be a 30-minute episode, but I guess because I was playing, going through that list took a little bit longer than anticipated. So, a couple of things to conclude the series on. Just, I have a note about starting the game, just a really, really high level. Just so Jennifer doesn't interrupt me while I'm trying to go through this. Okay, so for a high-level piece of advice, something that I realized when I was going through this. Here's the wolf hide and guts, by the way. Something that I realized when I was going through this playthrough this morning, when I was just playing on my own without commentary. And I've talked about this before, and I kind of teased at the beginning of this that I would bring it up again. I'm sorry for the more sedentary players out there who do like to settle down, but even if you are a sedentary player, if you want to play the Long Dark on the higher difficulty levels, which is Stalker and especially Interloper or any custom difficulty that resembles Interloper that's like at the hardest possible settings, the more you play and the more I play, the more we're all going to realize together, I think, that your number one priority is going to be moving. Period. The more I play at the high level, the more I realize the number one thing I always want to do is move. Especially if my goal is eventually to settle down and be sedentary and survive. Look at it this way. If you can get to the next scavengeable location, if you know you can get to the next spot you want to go to look for whatever loot you want to look for, without losing much condition, what are you waiting for? Go now. And notice I said condition. You could be starving, you could be exhausted by the time you get there. As long as you don't lose condition, as as long as you're close to 100% here, or you don't lose more than 20 or 30%, take that risk and go for it. Why wouldn't you? Because this might be your best chance. And the sooner you get to that best gear, the more of a chance of surviving future situations you have. So in the very early game, particularly at the high level, your number one priority is always going to be moving. I astonished myself when I was going through this playthrough, and you might have even seen it in episodes 18 and 19 to a certain extent. I just didn't really check my inventory that much. I didn't care. What I cared about was I need to get to the next spot. I need to keep going. I can't settle down yet. I don't have what I need. Keep moving. The more you play at a high level, the more you realize that the faster you move, the longer you will live. And now let me talk a little bit about the end game of The Long Dark on a really high level, almost a philosophically high level. The game is remember, the game is designed to kill you eventually, right? This is a game about surviving as long as you possibly can. Unless you play on Pilgrim, or unless you tweak the difficulty settings, wildlife will slowly stop respawning. Weather is going to gradually worsen and get crappier and more terrible, and the world will steadily get colder, and you're going to run out of matches eventually, and you just have a magnifying glass that will only work when the weather's not terrible. So again, it's about surviving as long as you possibly can. Dying at the end of a long run in The Long Dark, when you have nothing left and no means to continue, is a really cathartic, truly unique, and humbling experience. And it's part of what makes this game so great. So I just wanted to kind of conclude on that note. I hope that what I've recorded so far in this revised survival school kind of helps you fulfill that goal of reaching that eventual end, of dying later rather than sooner, right? Because that's the whole point. We're all going to die eventually, whether in life or in The Long Dark. I think that's one of the things that makes this game so interesting, is that normally we play games to escape, right? From whatever we might be dealing with in real life. And the main thing that tends to freak us out as human beings is our mortality. And this is a game about mortality, and yet it's engrossing, and we love it. And I just think that's such an interesting paradox in a way. It's an oxymoron almost, really. But it's been a pleasure to record this new Survival School series for you. Like I said, I'll do more as needed. I'm going to cap the regular series here. As I've said, just let me know if questions come up. If you're a new viewer, you're watching this a year from now, and you have some really big question that maybe feels like might deserve an extra video, let me know. I might not agree that it deserves an extra video, but I can answer the question in the comments if someone else hasn't already. So I hope I can count on Long Dark Legionaries to do the same when they revisit these episodes in the future, and when you guys just, that arrive at the channel in the future and get into the channel, discover this series, you can still come back and answer questions for folks if you feel like doing that. I really appreciate you now and in advance. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I will see you in the Quiet Apocalypse.